Some people become completely different people at night. Not louder, not more emotional, just unable to escape their own mind. The strange thing is, most of them look perfectly normal during the day. They function well, they answer texts, they finish their responsibilities. Some even seem calm, intelligent, emotionally controlled. But somewhere after midnight, something shifts. A single awkward conversation suddenly feels unbearable. A small mistake from years ago comes back like it happened yesterday. Their brain begins replaying scenarios that no one else remembers. And while the rest of the world sleeps, their mind stays awake, searching for something it cannot find: peace. What makes this even more exhausting is that overthinkers are rarely just thinking. They are predicting, preparing, scanning, trying to prevent pain before it happens. And after a while, they no longer know how to stop. Because for some people, overthinking was never simply a bad habit. It became a form of emotional survival. A way to stay one step ahead of rejection, one step ahead of embarrassment, one step ahead of heartbreak. And that may be why nighttime feels so dangerous to them. Because when the distractions disappear, they are finally left alone with every feeling they spent the entire day trying not to feel. For people who overthink at night, darkness does not just change the atmosphere, it changes the mind itself. During the day, thoughts are easier to escape. There are notifications to answer, responsibilities to finish, people to talk to, places to go. The noise of life keeps the deeper feelings buried underneath movement. But nighttime removes distractions, and in that silence, emotions become louder than logic. Suddenly, the brain starts reopening conversations that seemed meaningless hours ago. A simple text message gets analyzed 10 different ways. A facial expression from earlier in the day begins to feel suspicious. Even small memories return, carrying unexpected emotional weight. What feels exhausting is that overthinkers often know they are doing it. They know they are trapped in circles of thought that lead nowhere. But awareness does not automatically create peace, because this is rarely just about thinking too much. For many people, nighttime overthinking is what happens when an emotionally tired mind finally loses its distractions. And once the world slows down, unresolved fears quietly rise to the surface. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear that something important is about to fall apart. That is why nighttime feels so different to them. Not because the night creates new emotions, but because it finally reveals the ones they were too busy to feel during the day. What many people misunderstand about overthinking is that the brain is usually not trying to hurt them. It is trying to protect them, because the human mind does not repeat thoughts for no reason. It repeats thoughts that feel emotionally unfinished. That is why some people cannot simply stop thinking at night, even when they desperately want to sleep. Their brain keeps searching for hidden danger, for the mistake they might have missed, for the text message that sounded slightly different, for the subtle shift in someone's tone, for any sign that something painful could happen again. And after enough years of living this way, the mind slowly becomes trained to believe that relaxing completely is unsafe. So instead of resting, it stays alert. Some people develop this pattern very early in life without realizing it. Maybe they grew up in environments where their emotions felt unpredictable. Maybe they learned that making mistakes led to criticism, embarrassment, or rejection. Maybe peace inside the home could disappear without warning. And when a child grows up constantly trying to read moods, avoid conflict, or prepare for emotional discomfort, the nervous system adapts. It becomes hyper-aware. That hyper-awareness may look like overthinking in adulthood, but underneath it is often something much deeper, a brain that learned survival through anticipation. Because when someone spends years emotionally preparing for what could go wrong, the mind stops believing that calmness is safe. And that is why nighttime becomes so exhausting. The body is tired, but the brain still feels responsible for protecting them from tomorrow. During the day, most people are too busy surviving to notice what they truly feel. There is always something demanding attention: work, notifications, conversations, responsibilities, noise. And for people who overthink at night, distractions often become a form of emotional escape. Because staying busy is easier than sitting alone with unresolved feelings. But nighttime removes that escape. The world becomes quieter, the lights go dim, conversations end, and suddenly, emotions that were buried underneath the movement of the day begin rising back to the surface. Not all at once, but slowly. A memory they thought no longer mattered suddenly hurts again. A feeling of loneliness appears for no obvious reason. An old embarrassment replays in painful detail. A simple unanswered message begins to feel emotionally heavy. And the frightening part is that these emotions often seem irrational even to the person experiencing them. They may tell themselves, "You're overreacting, you need to calm down. Why are you still thinking about this?" But emotions do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They wait. And nighttime is often the first moment the mind becomes quiet enough to hear them again. That is why overthinkers frequently feel emotionally exhausted before they even fall asleep. Their brain is not only processing thoughts, it is processing suppressed fear, suppressed grief, suppressed insecurity, feelings they pushed aside all day just to function normally. Some people replay conversations because they fear rejection. Some imagine worst-case scenarios because uncertainty feels unsafe. Some constantly analyze the behavior of others because their nervous system learned to search for emotional danger before it arrives. And after years of doing this, overthinking stops feeling like a habit. It becomes an internal atmosphere, a mind that no longer knows how to fully relax, a nervous system that keeps preparing for pain, even in quiet moments. Because for many people, nighttime is not actually when the thoughts begin. It is simply when there are finally no distractions left, powerful enough to hide them. One of the most painful things about overthinkers is that many of them look emotionally fine to everyone else. They may appear calm, self-aware, responsible, even emotionally intelligent. But internally, many of them are carrying a kind of loneliness they rarely know how to explain. Because overthinking is often not just fear of bad outcomes. It is fear of emotional disconnection, fear of being misunderstood, rejected, ignored, forgotten, becoming too much for other people. That is why overthinkers tend to replay interactions long after they end. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because some part of them is still searching for reassurance. Did I say something wrong? Did they sound distant? Did I annoy them? Are they slowly losing interest in me? And the exhausting part is that this process rarely stops after one thought. The mind keeps digging deeper, trying to find certainty in situations where certainty may never fully exist. So, even in peaceful moments, the nervous system stays emotionally tense. Some people become so used to preparing for disappointment that they no longer know how to relax inside love, friendship, or even silence. And after years of this, many overthinkers quietly begin feeling alone around other people. Not because nobody cares about them, but because they struggle to feel emotionally safe enough to fully believe it. They learn how to hide their anxiety, hide their sensitivity, hide how deeply they analyze every emotional shift. Eventually, they become experts at appearing okay while internally carrying constant mental noise. And perhaps that is the hidden exhaustion of overthinking. Not simply having too many thoughts, but carrying a mind that is always trying to protect a heart that has been hurt before. A heart that keeps waiting for peace, while simultaneously struggling to trust it when it finally arrives. Overthinking rarely appears out of nowhere. For many people, it begins as an emotional talent, long before they realize it has become part of their personality. Sometimes it starts in childhood, in homes where emotions felt unpredictable, where love occasionally felt conditional, where making mistakes brought tension, criticism, or silence. A child growing up in that environment slowly learns something dangerous. Staying emotionally alert feels safer than relaxing, so they begin paying attention to everything. The tone in someone's voice, the sound of footsteps in another room, a facial expression that changes too quickly, the feeling that something bad might happen without warning. And over time, the nervous system becomes trained to anticipate emotional danger before it arrives. What once helped them survive emotionally as a child eventually follows them into adulthood. That is why many overthinkers struggle to fully rest, even when nothing is technically wrong. Their mind learned that peace could disappear suddenly, so instead of trusting calmness, they prepare for disruption. Some became people pleasers. Some became emotionally independent. Some learned to hide their needs completely. But underneath many of these behaviors is the same quiet fear. If I stop paying attention, something painful will catch me off guard. And after years of carrying that belief, the brain forgets how to simply exist in the present moment. It keeps scanning, analyzing, preparing. Not because the person is weak, but because their nervous system spent too long believing that vigilance was the price of emotional safety. Many overthinkers spend years believing that healing means finally becoming less emotional, less sensitive, less anxious, less aware. So they fight their own mind constantly. They try to force themselves not to think, not to worry, not to feel so deeply about everything. But healing is rarely about winning a war against your thoughts, because the mind usually becomes quiet only after it begins to feel safe. And for people who overthink at night, safety is often the very thing their nervous system has struggled to trust for a long time. That is why true healing often begins in much smaller, gentler ways than people expect. Not through perfection, not through controlling every outcome, but through slowly teaching the body that not every silence hides danger. Not every pause means abandonment. Not every mistake leads to rejection. Over time, the nervous system can learn something new. That rest is not laziness. That calmness is not weakness. That peace does not always disappear. And perhaps the most important part of healing is realizing this. Overthinking was never proof that someone was broken. In many cases, it was the mind trying very hard to protect a person who once felt emotionally unsafe. But survival is not the same as peace. And eventually, healing becomes less about constantly preparing for pain and more about finally allowing yourself to believe that safety, softness, and rest are possible too. Maybe the saddest part about overthinking is that many people spend their entire lives believing they simply think too much, when in reality, their mind was only trying to protect them from pain it never fully recovered from. And perhaps that is why nights feel so heavy sometimes. Because silence has a way of revealing the emotions we worked hardest to outrun during the day. But healing does not begin the moment the thoughts disappear. It begins the moment someone stops treating themselves like a problem that needs to be fixed. Little by little, the mind learns that not every moment will end in heartbreak. Not every connection will disappear. Not every quiet room hides danger. And maybe one day, the night will stop feeling like a battlefield inside your head and start feeling like a place where your mind finally understands it no longer has to survive alone. Thank you for spending this quiet moment with Silent Psychology. Until next time, take gentle care of your mind.